All right, welcome back to another Wright Stew podcast. I am Paul Stewart.
And I'm Brian Wright, still on our post-snow, super cold in North Carolina.
Yeah, it was real snow though. Nice, kind of the crunchy kind that you walk on, powdery. Not great for making snowmen or snowballs, but really nice to look at. And it's kind of melting away now. It doesn't stick around for very long, but yeah, beautiful.
Ideal. Yeah, absolutely.
So Brian, Hall of Fame voting. It's in. It's happened. Our inaugural episode we ever did was about Hall of Fame, this specific ballot. So go back if you haven't heard that one. Go back. It's the first one on the list. It's our inaugural episode, and we're baseball folks here, so we just dove right into that. And so the voting's in. We've got 3 new members to the Hall of Fame: Ichiro, Suzuki, CC Sabathia, and Billy Wagner. And a lot of excitement. I saw actually the video of CC Sabathia getting the phone call from the Hall of Fame, and his whole family was around, and it was, it kind of brought tears to my, just a really special moment. But we went into the depth of this. But what are some of your initial thoughts and feelings on those 3 getting in and kind of the process?
But Ichiro, the one guy who didn't vote for him, might need to, come out and say, I forgot. I
forgot to vote. Yeah,
something. I mean, it's got to be better excuse. First Japanese-born player to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. CC, we discussed. Billy Wagner, I saw a similar reaction to him. I think he was like 5 votes short last year, and so to be able to, I'm sure it's an awesome feeling. To me, the only no-brainer was Ichiro. And then the outside of him, it feels like you almost have to lobby for yourself, and I don't blame guys. These guys obviously had awesome careers. I heard a lot of talking heads, and I guess we're one of those guys now talking about it, but saying that, CC was a no-brainer, right? And I didn't, looking at him, growing up around him, obviously rubbing shoulders a little bit when I was with the Indians organization. Maybe that's tainting my view a little bit, but I didn't think he was a no-brainer. He got a very large percentage. I think it's 86.8 or almost 87% of the vote. And so if you get that kind of, clearly I'm wrong, but Billy Wagner, congratulations. CC, and Ichiro.
So let's go back to Ichiro. So there's been one in the history of baseball. There's been one unanimous 100% selected person, and that was Mariano Rivera in 2019. Right. So he's the only one of all time ever. So the one.
Now, let's hold that thought. Hold that thought for just a minute. What were the guys doing with like Babe Ruth?
Well, here's the thing. I went back and looked.
Mickey Mantle or
other highest percentages. So Derek Jeter also was one vote shy. He was 396 of 397. Griffey Jr. had 437 of 440, and this is in order the most. Tom Seaver was 425 out of 430. Nolan Ryan, 491 out of 497. And then some other folks that go down the lists: Kyle Ripken, Ty Cobb. This is the one that blew me away. Hank Aaron did not receive 100%. When Hank Aaron retired, he had the most home runs and most RBIs of all time ever. He wasn't there. Here's some other notables that did not get 100% of the vote that I don't know how that. Tony Gwynn, Randy Johnson, Greg Maddux, fellow named Babe Ruth got 95.1% of the vote. Actually, you know what? Adrian Beltre and Babe Ruth had the same amount of vote. Like, what? Come on. So I don't know what is going on with the voters, why they don't vote for people.
I think it is like this group, and there's like a Paul Stewart in that group.
Hey.
Who's a hardcore traditionalist. It's like, hey, you can't get 100% of the vote.
I was a big Ryan Sandberg fan growing up. Love Rhino, love the Cubbies. And Ryan Sandberg set the standard for the modern day second baseman. No he had like 125 consecutive games without an error one season, 9 Gold Gloves, a bunch of All-Stars. He was an MVP. It kind of brought power to the second base positions. It was a kind of a speedster early. And he was a second ballot Hall of Famer. I'm like, dude, what is Ryan Sandberg was the best
standard.
He was the standard in the 80s into the early 90s for a second baseman. what are we doing? Like, how do you not vote for that?
Well, again, I think it goes back to the traditionalists. They're like, hey, nobody gets 100% on their first time, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. The names you named were no brainers, especially Hank Aaron, considering
Yeah.
the total picture. I know baseball, unlike a lot of other Hall of Fames, likes to look at off the field. That was kind of the reasoning for not letting Pete Rose
Oh,
in so
geez,
long.
yeah.
And there's got to be a writer probably over your career that has some influence. It's like, no, I'm not voting for this guy. He brushed me off one time after a bad game or good game or
Yeah.
whatever. And I think there's some human element that I don't know. I almost think with any Hall of Fame, I think you would get some different results if you were required to post your ballot like
Oh,
like if you're a Hall of Fame,
yeah.
if you're a Hall of Fame voter, hey, this is my guys. These are the guys I got in. And if you want to put down why or why not, whatever.
Yeah.
I think you would have a little bit different because the guy who didn't vote Ichiro, and ultimately the guy probably Hank Aaron is dead by now. But
Yeah.
geez, I mean, what do you want a guy to do?
And it honestly, it doesn't matter. They're in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of
Yeah.
Fame doesn't say this guy got in at 75% or 100% of the vote. You're in the Hall of Fame, you're a Hall of Fame, which is
Yeah.
ultimately what it's all about, right? But you mentioned like writers having beef with guys. And so that got me back. So one kind of the most infamous, maybe of all time, Hall of Fames was the 2013 Hall of Fame. So 2013 was the year nobody was elected to the Hall of Fame for that class. Now there were guys on the ballot who eventually got into the Hall of Fame. But let me tell you, first on the first ballot that year were Kurt Schilling, Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, Craig Biggio, Mike Piazza, and Sammy Sosa. And then a handful of others who weren't quite on that level. On that ballot, Sammy Sosa got 12.5% of the vote. Barry Bonds got 36.2, and Roger Clemens 37.6, and Kurt Schilling 38.8. So
Well,
here's
what
the
you
thing. You
have,
talk about Sammy Sosa.
yeah.
And people seem to think he is only steroid produced. Dude had some massive years, right? He was
Well,
really good.
oh, I think we've kind of hit on it. I think I've kind of changed my point of view. I think the steroid guys you have to put in because you don't know who's on it. I think right there you have politics with Schilling that people didn't like,
Schilling,
and then you have
is,
steroids. Maybe, probably. And so, but there were so many guys that were on it. I want to turn this a different way. Do you feel like? And again, I don't want to pick on anybody because I'm nobody, but like Billy Wagner, does he belong with like Hank Aaron or Pedro or it just feels like there's almost two tiers of Hall of Fame. I heard Deion Sanders a while back. He's like, man, we're letting in all these guys, and it's like we need like a Hall of Fame of the Hall of Fame. And I'm not saying that. It just feels like Billy Wagner on his last year gets in, and again, dude, what a great career, but it just doesn't feel like he belongs. CC gets in easily, and his stats, we looked at him, had some really good postseason runs, did great with the Brewers for that short little stint.
yeah.
Didn't feel like he should be automatic. It just feels like, we've kind of changed the standard based on,
Well, so that's an
people.
interesting perspective because I think there is like an inner circle, if you want to call it something like that, right? And what's interesting this year, so Billy Wagner got in on his 10th year, right?
Final year. Yeah.
We've looked at Francisco Rodriguez, K-Rod, right? Their numbers are really close.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really close from a career perspective, right? K-Rod actually has more saves. Wagner's ERA is a little lower. Wagner has a little higher strikeout percentage, but both were dominant for a good stretch. K-Rod this year got what was his votes? 10.2% of the vote. So that got me thinking, all right, and this is K-Rod's third year on the ballot. What was Billy Wagner at his third year of the ballot? 11.1%.
It's just weird.
So Billy Wagner was essentially at the same spot as K-Rod. Is K-Rod a different player now than he will be in 7 years? No.
Yeah, clearly.
But
Yeah, you can't do anything about it once you hang the spikes up. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't understand some of that. Like we kind of talked about it. I think they need to be like, look, man, 5 years on the ballot. That's probably if you're not a Hall of Famer, you're not a Hall of Famer.
You know, it's baseball.
And
They have trouble changing the rules, and and so it's one of those
yeah,
things where it's. I don't disagree with you at all, but I do think it's interesting that you can go from literally 10% or 12% or 11%, and then 8 years later or 7 years later end up getting in, and you haven't done anything other than maybe not get in trouble off the field, and
yeah, which
you
is
know
what really hurt Kurt Schilling. And I think Kurt Schilling's of all the steroids. I
he
get it.
wasn't really. I don't. I've never.
He
Who
was never a
knows?
steroid. He was a loudmouth. He was a
Yeah.
loudmouth. Is what he was. Very opinionated. He saw things differently than a lot of people in the mainstream media did. They didn't like what he had to say. That
Yeah.
doesn't change that he was one of the most clutch postseason pitchers of all time. That he put up some statistics that can't be matched by a lot of people. Uh, so
It's kind of odd though. It's honestly when you think about it, obviously he leaned pretty hard right,
yeah,
and really in a lot of cases didn't say. He said in a lot of cases what people were thinking. He just had a platform for it. But
yeah.
on the flip side, I would say you would think baseball writers would lean a little bit right. You would think if any writers out of writers,
Of all maybe hockey, maybe. I
yeah,
don't know.
maybe hockey, but you would think baseball does. But clearly that is not the case because he would be in if politics were
Yeah, weren't a thing. So the other thing that got me thinking as well, and so we kind of talked about, so a couple of guys that were close this year, Carlos Beltran, 70.3% of the vote, and then Andrew Jones, 66.2% on his eighth year.
Hey, so I did hear after we did our inaugural episode, we were like, man, why is he not in? I heard he had an issue like spousal abuse, Andre.
So domestic violence.
Yeah, yeah, and so that would, again, baseball does seem to take in some of that off the field, and I don't know if it's confirmed, but there are definitely articles written around it. So I'm sure that's hurting him. Otherwise, he should be in. And Carlos is. I love his swing,
Yeah.
but again, he doesn't feel like a Hall of Famer. He had some stretch of years that were really good, but
Well,
it's pretty incredible.
based on the voting, he's at 70.3% this year on his third year. Next year will be his fourth.
He's
Seems
going
like
to get in.
seems like he's getting in pretty locked in. And next year, I was looking at fast forwarding a year, kind of the first two guys that lead the 2026 ballot are Cole Hamels and Ryan Braun. Neither of those guys feel like I mean, Braun was a PED guy.
Yeah.
And like very famously stood out there and said, I didn't do it, and then started throwing other people under the bus. I mean, if we're talking about character, Braun is not getting in. Cole Hamels I felt like a really solid pitcher, but not a
Yeah.
Hall of Fame level. I mean, other guys on the ballot next year, newcomers will be Alex Gordon, Shin Soo Choo, Edward Encarnacion, Howie Kendrick, Nick Markakis. Those guys aren't getting in. So maybe that does.
I think that pushes up K Rod and some other guys because I almost
Yeah.
feel like we run into this situation where they feel like they need to put somebody in. Like we're not.
Yeah.
There's only one 2013 because there's that was the year nobody got
That
in.
was the year and the steroids. The other guy who didn't get as many votes as I thought this year was Felix Hernandez.
I don't think people remember how good he is or was.
Yeah, only 20.6% of the vote. Felt like he would get more than that. I mean, he was pretty solid, man. Was really good. And so that was the other one that really kind of shocked me a little bit. And then there's a handful of people who didn't qualify and won't be on the ballot moving forward. My guy,
What do you have to get
my guy
to?
Anthony Ramirez, who I struck out, got 0 votes. So clearly that.
What do you got to get? 10% to stay on it.
5%.
5% to stay on it.
Yeah.
It's dumb. Either I don't know, 5% to stay on. I don't know. It's a weird, like secret club that votes for these. And again, they got Ichiro mostly right. The one guy needs to quit or say, hey, I was hurt and I don't have the ability to vote. I was in the hospital. Give one of those excuses.
Yeah, that's I don't know, man. Ichiro over and if you throw his Japanese league stats on there,
No, it's no brainer. And almost think you have to. And I think there would be people that disagree with it, but I almost think you have to take it into consideration.
Yeah. So speaking of Japanese league as well, we've seen a movement, and mostly by the Dodgers, right, to bring over some Japanese league players, which is interesting. But did you see what Cam Newton said?
Well, I think he said baseball was irrelevant at one point in time. So that kind of, again, I've listened to Cam. I like Cam as a player, but I've kind of gotten to the.
So he said baseball is on the decline. He said he thought in the next 20 years the WNBA would be more relevant than Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I think that's somebody on a platform that, and again, I can't blame him, that says stuff to kind of get attention. Maybe he believes it. Maybe he hasn't been to a game. Maybe he hasn't realized the international foothold. Cam's super talented, but as far as his opinions on what he, outside of maybe playing the quarterback position, they're kind of irrelevant to baseball. And I mean, I think the WNBA without Caitlin Clark and a large investment from the NBA is non-existent.
It's not doing anything. And he cited some of it was international. He's like, oh, there's a lot of guys coming over from Japan, and there's not enough American-born players. Which, I mean,
well, I don't disagree with that.
But if he's going that route, look at the NBA now. The NBA is.
Yeah, but right now we're 50-50 in the MLB, and the NBA is still 90% or 80%, 85, 90% American-born. I do think there is something to it. And I do think that the American player not being the majority has an impact on the audience. I think it's just natural to want to be able to see guys that either you look like or grew up with, or can tell a story that, hey, this kid grew up in, Garner, North Carolina, or Aberdeen, Texas, and then went to, JUCO. And, you want to hear those stories opposed to, hey, he was signed at 16 years old and you have difficulty pronouncing his name.
This year, there are more international players than the NBA than ever. 125 international players from 43 countries. The Joker, Joel Embiid.
Oh, yes, some really good ones.
Victor Wembanyama over in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Luka Doncic.
Yeah.
Like, literally the Greek freak, Giannis. Like, the best players right now in the NBA are not American-born. Right?
Oh, there's no question. There's no question. But I do think
the WNBA, and I don't know what the WNBA rosters are made up of. I'm assuming that's mostly American-born players. But
yeah,
I mean, to say the WNBA is going to be bigger than baseball is, come on, Cam. That's dumb. That's not real.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you say things to stoke a fire.
Yeah,
because it's going to get headlines.
Yeah.
He's making a transition to where he kind of did his own thing podcast, and then he's had some conversations and working with ESPN and working with people where he needs to be able to, not be Stephen A. Smith, but Stephen A. Smith gets attention for a reason, and it's not always because he's right, but it's usually because he's saying something that's a little bit outlandish.
Yeah, he's loud. Yeah, he's loud. So Hall of Fame voting. Congratulations to Ichiro, Billy Wagner, and CC Sabathia. All right, we've got an update for you, Brian. We threw out the 50 and 15 challenge.
Yeah.
And you know what? Our listeners have been hitting it hard, have been sharing it out. So yesterday we picked up Indiana, Kansas, Missouri, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Oklahoma, New Jersey, and Mississippi. So did really well. So thank you to our listeners out there. Special shout out to Aunt Kiki for getting it done. And we appreciate
Kiki needs to, maybe she gets a shirt or get something to, we still got the merchandise. I think Kiki clearly advertising, if that's not her job, it should be her job.
We do have a merch shop, Ryan. So if you're out there listening, hey, make sure you're sharing this with others. Hey, but check out that merch shop, man. Some really cool gear in there.
Hey, you can get your own speaker studio on your back.
Yeah. You can walk around and people ask, what is that? You say, it's the greatest pod that I listen to. I love it. So, so thanks for joining us today. We appreciate you listening. Go out there and have a great day.
Out. Go Pack.